lived 64 years with diabetes, and that is a huge accomplishment. He's got a few things to share about how we eat and how to take care of our health and how you too can live a long life with diabetes. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So tell me, 64 years ago, or whenever you were first diagnosed, that is a long time ago, and not as much was known about this illness. What were some of the first things that you learned about the illness that enabled you to take control over your own health?
There was really not that much control. My doctors, I had to go to 4 different doctors before there was even a diagnosis. The first 3 saw all the classic symptoms of type 1 diabetes. Not one of them recognized that that was what was wrong with me. A 4th doctor did finally figure it out, had my blood sugar tested, and I was diagnosed. The only advice he could give was to my parents, I was 6 years old, was don't give him any sugar and keep all the foods with high sugar content away from him. There was no other advice for years and years after that. That's all we had to follow.
And work when you were 6 years old?
It shouldn't probably have worked as well as it did. I was taking insulin that was taken from the bodies of pigs and cows, commonly referred to as pork and beef insulin, and it kept me healthy. I had lost so much weight before diagnosis. I was much underweight. I regained my health. I flourished. I didn't ever become overweight. I was just right. Everything seemed to be just right. I was running high blood sugar. Of course, we weren't able to test the blood sugar, but we tested urine, and it showed high sugar all the time. For some reason or another, I did not develop complications for many years.
Back then, it seems like diabetes was pretty rare, and now all of a sudden you hear about it happening in children everywhere. What do you think has changed?
There were many people back then who were diabetic who were not diagnosed. I almost was not diagnosed, and I'm sure there were thousands who were not diagnosed. People maybe even becoming chronically ill or dying, but doctors couldn't determine that it was diabetes. They probably attributed it to something else. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
I'm sure it does. Now, what advice do you give to somebody today who's just been diagnosed with diabetes? What would you encourage them to do and not to do?
I would encourage them to find out as much as they can about their condition, to not ignore it, and think it'll go away. I see so many people on the diabetes websites that think, well, I'm just going to go on living like I want to live, like I always have, and this is not really going to bother me like maybe it does other people. That attitude exists, and it's hard for me to understand. There are books. There's much knowledge that's available now that was not available when I was diagnosed. And there's so many ways. I love the online diabetes websites. They are so good to help you. There are so many volunteers. I found out more about diabetes after I joined the websites, and that started in July of 2006, than any other media that I tried prior to that time.
And you'd already lived a long time, obviously.
Oh,
by
my
then.
goodness. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was diagnosed at 45, so, and I just didn't know much about it. And I essentially feel like I have, some people tell me I have good genes. Maybe it's genetic.
Well, you do. And you've got some good advice. So tell me, once someone has gotten a lot of information, are there certain foods? I mean, staying away from sugar is, good advice, but is there really specific diet that you follow, and do you stay away religiously from certain foods and eat other foods?
A lot of diabetics have found they have to figure out their own diet. They eat various foods that keep notes. Maybe one food bothers one diabetic, doesn't bother the other diabetic as much. They have to take more insulin if they're a type 1 like me. Someone else may eat that same food and not have to take as much. It's an individual kind of thing. And I found out I can eat certain things that other type 1 diabetics don't, and it doesn't bother me so much. So you can't go by a particular hard and fast diet. You have to sort of devise your own diet, what works for you.
And now, of course, the insulin has changed so much. You're not doing
pork
and beef insulin anymore, right?
That's another big point in my book.
Right.
The animal insulin that we early diabetics took contained something called C-peptide. Mm-hmm. C-peptide helps prevent complications. Mm-hmm. The new modern-day insulins not taken from animals does not have C-peptide. So protection against complications is not there. So you have to achieve it in other ways. I didn't have complications for the 40 years I used animal insulin, but now I don't have the C-peptide, and what I have found is that I have to improvise. I have to depend more on proper choices of food. I have cut my carbohydrate intake down drastically, and I exercise more. That seems to have worked. I had beginning stages of complications, but after this tight schedule I'm leading now, they disappeared, and I still have no complications.
Wow, that's great. Now, are there people who live with diabetes that have not been diagnosed, that don't even know they have it?
They have the symptoms. Either they live in some undeveloped country where there's not many good physicians who are likely to be able to detect it. I read all too often that even in the United States there are doctors who don't recognize that it's diabetes that they're examining after all this time. So not being diagnosed properly is not unusual. It's not uncommon at all. And I just wish it was different, but I don't know. The proper doctor for a diabetic to go to is an endocrinologist who is a specialist in diabetes. If you go to a general practitioner, you may not be diagnosed. On the other hand, sir, there are some general practitioners who really do understand and can diagnose the problem. Mm-hmm. So it's hit and miss.
What are some symptoms that you're likely to feel if you have undiagnosed diabetes?
A lot of thirst, drinking an excessive amount of water, and seems that you can never satisfy that thirst. My mother told me I lost my appetite. I wasn't eating. And those early doctors, not knowing I had diabetes, prescribed a tonic to increase my appetite. Uh-huh. The tonic contained sugar, more than likely, which added to the problem.
Right.
That's the way it was back then.
You've come a long way.
A lot of urination. Of course, that would follow drinking all that water. Losing weight. Lost a lot of weight. I was very much underweight. I was just skin and bones. And I don't know how much longer I could have lived under those conditions, not eating, losing weight, if I hadn't finally been diagnosed by that fourth doctor.
Sure. Richard, tell me why you wrote this book.
I joined the websites. Many people were interested. What was it like back in the 40s and 50s to be a diabetic? So I started writing blogs. They were interested in my blogs. So many of them said, "Oh, please keep this going. Don't stop now. Keep it going." And I didn't know whether it would even be accepted, but there's a self-publishing option on Amazon.com, and I found it easy to go through that. It was published, and it's selling well.
I just wish you lots of continued great health and continue to be an inspiration for everybody that is following your story. Thanks for being a guest on the show today.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed the interview.
The book is Beating the Odds, 64 Years of Diabetes Health with Richard Vaughn, and I encourage you to pick it up at Amazon and read your own copy and take care of your health. Thanks for being with us on the show today.